All right, here with legendary boxing commentator Paul Upham. Paul, George Kambosos, Jake Wiley, what are your impressions of this fight?
Well, look, it's a short notice fight, which is always dangerous because you never know what's going to happen. Wiley's getting the opportunity of a lifetime, a week or so ago this fight wasn't even on for him. So, he'll come in all guns blazing. But if George wants to dominate and become a world champion again at the highest level, he's got to win this fight. He's going to show us that George Kambosos Jr. at his best is still one of the most dangerous fighters in his weight class. And so I'm expecting a good win from him. Wiley's going to give him everything he can because it's just, dream come true. I always say the hardest things is making the fights. Getting the fight opportunities. So, when somebody else has to pull out at short notice, and Wally gets this short notice fight, it's a dream come true. So he's going to make the most of it. But I just think, George Kambosos is a step above.
Does George need to come out and make a statement in this fight?
I just think he needs to win, and just look good, Just be clinical, get his boxing skills going. George was never a big knockout puncher. He was more of a skilled technician. We saw against Tszyu Lopez, when his big breakout win, he just outthought him, outboxed him. So I want to see the skills of George Kambosos. He doesn't have to be this, knockout puncher. And I think we've seen at the elite level, with Tszyu stepping up, you've got to have those skills. You've got to have the defence. And so many guys these days don't have a defence. So I want to see the total package from George on Saturday night.
What are you made of? We've got Eddie Hearn here, we've got David Diamante over there. What have you made of the Australian landscape here sort of evolve over the past 6 to 12 months?
Look, it's just a compliment on what we have in Australian boxing because, and I know, boxing in Australia has always been a very, very small minority sport. It has big breakout events, we're one-off events here and there. And so to have the support of Matchroom and, Eddie Hearn coming down here and DAZN, and even to have someone like David Diamante here, as host, to get that spotlight on Australian boxing, to have that on George and Sky, she's done fantastic in Australian as a world champion, but probably not many people know of her exploits here in Australia. So, this is the opportunity for the boxers and everybody on the card to say, hey, look at Australian boxing. We've got a lot of good young people coming up. There's a lot of stars out there, and we can make a contribution around the world.
Now, I want to get your thoughts on some of the other fighters on the scene at the moment. Opetaia, he's doing great things, potential unification there against Ramirez. Where do you see Opetaia going?
Look, Jai's just the quiet star, isn't he? You don't hear much from him, he just gets the job done, he fights regularly, does what you want him to do as a world champion, and he's clearly, our best world champion right now, our best boxer right now. He's in demand on the world scene. As you said, that unification match at cruiserweight, don't know if it's going to happen straight away because Ramirez has got to have another mandatory. So hopefully by the end of the year, undisputed world champion. And look, it sets him up to move up to heavyweight. Do what Usyk's done, to become undisputed cruiserweight world champion, move up and compete at heavyweight for world titles. That's a dream. And that's where the big money, isn't it? As much as to be undisputed cruiserweight world champion is important, to step up to heavyweight and win a heavyweight world title or world titles, that's the dream for him, I think. And he's got the size. He really can put a few more kilos on. He's still got the height, to be able to do exactly what Alexander Usyk's done at heavyweight and win world titles. So, and I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. He's still improving every fight.
Tszyu, he's scheduled to fight Joey Spencer next month in Newcastle. Thoughts on that fight and what have you made of Tszyu's time since that loss to Buckram?
Got to spend a little bit of time with Tim in January because we had his dad Tszyu over and did a couple of shows around Australia. And look, Tim's saying all the right things. He always trained really hard. There was never any problems with Tim's skills. He's got all the punches, he's got the combinations, and his fitness is elite. It's the defence. He's got to tighten his defence up. And as I mentioned before, a lot of guys aren't showing the defence they probably need to at elite level of boxing. And, I said to Tim, the margins are very, very thin at the highest level. So you don't have to throw everything out and start again. It's just retuning, retooling and come up with a better game plan. And look, I expect Tim to be back at his best in this fight. There's all the pressure on him. You've got to win. He's got to win now. I can't have another loss. But I expect they'll bring the best out of him. But we're probably not going to see until next year or later this year when he steps up and fights a significant top 10 guy or for a world title. We're going to see, at the elite level, how can he do it? Because I think Tszyu's got everything you need. But, some guys, when they have a bad loss like that, they're never the same again, So it'll be interesting to see how he comes back. But I think he'll win and win well this week.
Now, you were well and truly on the circuit when Kostya lost to Vince Phillips. Could this be Tszyu's Vince Phillips moment?
Well, that's the easy comparison is that, and we've said many times, Costa thanked Vince Phillips. He actually brought him back to Russia on a tour. And Vince was a bit surprised about that. And he always said, I always think Vince Phillips, because he changed me from a professional boxer to a professional athlete and helped me become undisputed world champion. So is those two losses? The first loss, with the cut was just unfortunate. The second loss was a bad loss. So Tim's got to, change things. What does he change? And as I said, I think it's just his aggression, just too much aggression sometimes. Just teal it back a little bit, use his boxing skills and have a little bit more defence, and I think he'll be fine. He can compete with all the guys in his level, but people are going to say now, oh no, he's just a nobody, he's just Costa's son, blah, blah, blah. There's more to Tszyu than that. We know that, but he's got to show it.
Now, last one. What about yourself, mate? You've got a book. It's a... Talk us through this book, Paul.
It's got nothing to do with boxing except that this wonderful gentleman, Sir Ramesh Patel, wrote my Tszyu biography and said, can you do the same thing on me? And I said, oh, well, tell me the story. So he told me the story. He grew up, he basically been working in Papua New Guinea, but he set up a charity foundation supporting women and children in Papua New Guinea. And he's the most amazing story. He's been knighted by King Charles. He got an OBE from Queen Elizabeth. And he's just been fantastic for the people up there. I got to go up there twice and follow him around, and part of it's in the book here. And it's just a privilege to have something to be able to do this outside of boxing and show that I'm not just a boxer. As much as I always love boxing, and I'm a boxing guy, to have this opportunity to do a non-boxing book, shows that I can do anything in that sort of literary author category, which is great. So you get an opportunity like that again because of Costa. Outside of boxing was just amazing. But it's taken me 3 years. It's a lot of hard work, but I'm so proud of it. So it's just an amazing life story. It's an Indian heritage story, and it's actually published by HarperCollins India. So you've got a white Aussie guy writing an Indian heritage story published by HarperCollins India. So that in itself is an amazing story. So I just feel privileged. So the power of perseverance, it's for everybody, and everybody can take something away from it.
Nice one. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Joe. It's always great to see you.